The literature of Algeria. Background literature, written by people born in what is now Algeria, dates back over 1,500 years and has been written in several languages. Around the year AD 400, Christian theologian St. Augustine, writing in Latin, composed Confessions, one of the world's great spiritual autobiographies. Later, as the region converted to Islam, the native Berber population adopted Arabic as a common language. Then, between 1830 and 1962, Algeria was a French colony, and many writers wrote in French. Two of the best-known Algerian writers of the 20th century are famous for their optimism. Mohammed Dib, 1920 to 2003, offered a sweeping view of modern Algerian history in a set of 3 novels known as the Algerian Trilogy. A believer in the equality of all people, he once declared that the things that make us different always remain secondary. Albert Camus, 1913 to 1960, in novels such as The Stranger, explored the absurdity of human existence in an indifferent universe. Camus believed that humans could create their own meaning and treat one another justly. Algeria and the United States' U.S.-Algerian relations have often been tense over the past 2 centuries. In the 1790s, privateers, pirates licensed by a government based in North Africa, seized U.S. ships and sailors. These seizures resulted in a series of military battles. In the past 6 decades, the 2 countries have clashed over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the Middle East. However, in recent years, record levels of trade have provided a closer link between the 2 countries. Today, about 30% of Algeria's exports go to the United States. Most of these are natural gas or oil. Research, collaborate with a partner. Dib and Camus belong to a group of Algerian writers known as the Generation of 52. Though friends, the 2 differed on the cause of Algerian independence from France. Dib supported it. Camus opposed it. With a partner, collaborate to research the reasons for their positions and write a 1 to 2 page imaginary conversation between these 2 men about the issue. Think carefully about how to divide the work and make a clear plan. My father writes to my mother, Assia, Djebar. Before you read. Fatima Zora Imalean, 1936, is an Algerian novelist, poet, translator, and filmmaker. Her father, a teacher, sent her to school, despite the fact that education was uncommon for Algerian girls. When she wrote her first novel, she began using the name Assia Djebar, in case he didn't approve of her work. Djebar writes in French, although she enriches that language with the sounds and rhythms of Arabic. As you read, consider the importance of the story's setting, the time and place in which it takes place. Could it be set elsewhere and still make sense? Whenever my mother spoke of my father, she, in common with all the women in her town, simply used the personal pronoun in Arabic corresponding to him. Thus, every time she used a verb in the 3rd person singular which didn't have a noun subject, she was naturally referring to her husband. This form of speech was characteristic of every married woman, from 15 to 60, with the proviso that in later years, if the husband had undertaken the pilgrimage to Mecca, he could be given the title of Hajj. Everybody, children and adults, especially girls and women, since all important conversations took place among the womenfolk, learnt very quickly to adapt to this rule whereby a husband and wife must never be referred to by name. After she had been married a few years, my mother gradually learnt a little French. She was able to exchange a few halting words with the wives of my father's colleagues, who had, for the most part, come from France and, like us, lived with their families in the little block of flats set aside for the village teachers. Proviso condition. Stipulation. World context in Algeria. Muslim women are unable to do many things that Western women may take for granted. In the following story, Djebar explores the time when her father broke with tradition by writing to her mother. Literary lens. Setting. My father writes to my mother 393. Unequivocally, clearly, unambiguously. Euphemisms, polite expression, delicy, circumlocutions, towndabout expressions, insolent, disrespectful, araga, incongruous, improper, appropriate, irrefutable, marguable, undeniable, taciturn, nor talkative, quiet by nature. I don't know exactly when my mother began to say, "My husband has come, my husband has gone out. I'll ask my husband," etc. Although my mother did make rapid progress in the language, in spite of taking it up fairly late in life, I can still hear the evident awkwardness in her voice betrayed by her labored phraseology, her slow and deliberate enunciation at that time. Nevertheless, I can sense how much it cost her modesty to refer to my father directly in this way. It was as if a floodgate had opened within her, perhaps in her relationship with her husband. Years later, during the summers we spent in her native town, when chatting in Arabic with her sisters or cousins, my mother would refer to him quite naturally by his first name, even with a touch of superiority. What a daring innovation. Yes, quite unhesitatingly. I was going to say unequivocally in any case, without any of the usual euphemisms and verbal circumlocutions. When her aunts and elderly female relations were present, she would once more use the traditional formalities. Out of respect for them, such freedom of language would have appeared insolent and incongruous to the ears of the pious old ladies. Years went by. As my mother's ability to speak French improved, while I was still a child of no more than 12, I came to realize an irrefutable fact, namely that, in the face of all these womenfolk, my parents formed a couple. One thing was an even greater source of pride in me. When my mother referred to any of the day-to-day incidents of our village life, which in our city relatives' eyes was very backward, the tall figure of my father-me childhood hero seemed to pop up in the midst of all these women engaged in idle chat on the old patios to which they were confined. My father. No one except my father. None of the other women ever saw fit to refer to their menfolk, their masters who spent the day outside the house and returned home in the evening, taciturn, with eyes on the ground. The nameless, uncles, cousins, relatives by marriage, were for us an unidentifiable collection of individuals to all of whom their spouses alluded impartially in the masculine gender, to phraseology, a method of putting one's words together. With the exception of my father, my mother, with lowered eyes, would calmly pronounce his name Tar, which, one learned very early, meant the pure, and even when a suspicion of a smile flickered across the other women's faces, or they looked half ill at ease, half indulgent, I thought that a rare distinction lit up my mother's face. These harem conversations ran their imperceptible course. My ears only caught those phrases which singled my mother out above the rest. Because she always made a point of bringing my father's name into these exchanges, he became for me still purer than his given name betokened. One day, something occurred which was important that their relationship would never be the same again. A commonplace enough event in any other society, but which was unusual to say the least with us in the course of an exceptionally long journey away from home. To a neighboring province, I think, my father wrote to my mother. Yes, to my mother. He sent her a postcard with a short greeting written diagonally across it in his large, legible handwriting. Something like, "Best wishes from this distant region," or possibly, "I am having a good journey in getting to know an unfamiliar region," etc. And he signed it simply with his first name. I am sure that, at the time, he himself would not have dared add any more intimate formula above his signature, such as, "I am thinking of you," or even less, "Yours affectionately." But on the half of the card reserved for the address of the recipient, he had written, "Madame," followed by his own surname with the possible addition, "But here I'm not sure, and children? That is to say, we three, of whom I, then about 10 years old, was the eldest." The radical change in customs was apparent for all to see. My father had quite brazenly written his wife's name, in his own handwriting, on a postcard which was going to travel from one town to another, which was going to be exposed to so many masculine eyes, including eventually our village postman, a Muslim postman to boot. And what is more, he had dared to refer to her in the Western manner as Madame so and so, whereas no local man, poor or rich, ever referred to his wife and children in any other way than by the vague periphrasis. The household. Imperceptible. Babel table. Betokened. Dicated. Showed. Portent sig. Forewarning presage. 396. My father had written to my mother. When she visited her family, she mentioned this postcard, in the simplest possible words and tone of voice, to be sure. She was about to describe her husband's 4 or 5 days' absence from the village, explaining the practical problems this had posed. My father having to order the provisions just before he left, so that the shopkeepers could deliver them every morning. She was going to explain how hard it was for a city woman to be isolated in a village with very young children and cut off in this way. But the other women had interrupted, exclaiming, in the face of this new reality, this almost incredible detail, he wrote to you, to you. He wrote his wife's name, and the postman must have read it. Shame. He could at least have addressed the card to his son, for the principle of the thing, even if his son is only 7 or 8. My mother did not reply. She was probably pleased, flattered even, but she said nothing. Perhaps she was suddenly ill at ease, or blushing from embarrassment. Yes, her husband had written to her in person. The eldest child, the only one who might have been able to read the card, was her daughter. So, daughter or wife, where was the difference as far as the addressee was concerned? I must remind you that I've learned to read French now. This postcard was, in fact, a most daring manifestation of affection. Her modesty suffered at that very moment that she spoke of it. Yet, it came second to her pride as a wife, which was secretly flattered. The murmured exchanges of these segregated women struck a faint chord with me as a little girl with observing eyes. And so, for the first time, I seemed to have some intuition of the possible happiness, the mystery in the union of a man and a woman. My father had dared to write to my mother. Both of them referred to each other by name, which was tantamount to declaring openly their love for each other. My father by writing to her, my mother by quoting my father henceforward without false shame in all her conversations. Tantamount, equal, equivalent. Read and think, critically analyze, cite, infer, of time and place for this story. Cite specific words and phrases that evoke the setting. 2. How do the characters of the narrator's father and mother advance the plot in this story?